A black nurse kissed the billionaire in coma, thinking he'd never know, but he heard everything and fell in love with her. The soft beep of machines filled the silence as Zara Williams pressed her lips against the unconscious man's forehead, whispering words she never thought anyone would hear. "I wish you could wake up, Daniel. I wish you knew how much you mean to me." "Hey there, my friend. How are you doing today? I hope you're somewhere cozy because you're about to hear a story that'll make your heart race and maybe bring a tear to your eye. I'm so glad you're here with me because this one is special. Grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and trust me when I say you'll want to hear every single word of what happened next." What Zara didn't know was that Daniel Gatsby, yes, the Daniel Gatsby, heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, had been conscious for the past 3 minutes. Every word, every gentle touch, every stolen moment she thought was private, he had felt it all. And in that instant, as her lips touched his skin with such tender care, something shifted in his world forever. But let me back up, love, because you need to understand how we got here. You need to know why a brilliant, compassionate nurse was falling for a man she believed would never wake up, and why that single kiss would unravel secrets that powerful people had killed to protect. If you're not part of our family yet, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you will have you questioning everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the price of truth. 3 months earlier, Daniel Gatsby's Bugatti had wrapped around an oak tree on Highway 101, but this wasn't just any accident, my friend. Someone wanted him dead. And the only person standing between him and that fate was a night shift nurse who had no idea she was about to become the most important person in a billionaire's life. Are you ready to find out what really happened that night? Because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about this story. Picture this. It's 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October, rain hammering against the windows of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center like nature itself was trying to break in. Zara Williams was 3 hours into her 12-hour shift, her scrubs still crisp despite the chaos that emergency rooms bring. She had been a nurse for 8 years, but nothing, and I mean nothing, had prepared her for what rolled through those doors that night. You see that, my friend? The way fate works sometimes, it's like the universe has a twisted sense of humor. The paramedics burst in, shouting medical terms over the thunder outside. Male, approximately 30, multiple trauma, possible internal bleeding, been unconscious since the scene. But it wasn't the injuries that made Zara's breath catch, it was the face. Even battered and blooded, even with machines breathing for him, she recognized Daniel Gatsby from every magazine cover, every news story, every tabloid headline. The richest bachelor in America was dying in her emergency room. Room 314, Dr. Sarah Connor barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Williams, you're his primary. Don't let him die." No pressure, right? If you were there, love, you would have felt the electricity in that room. The way everyone moved with desperate precision. The way hope and fear danced together in the fluorescent light. But as Zara worked to stabilize him, something else was happening. Something she couldn't explain. Every time she touched his hand to check his pulse, every time she adjusted his four, every time she spoke to him the way nurses do, talking to unconscious patients as if they can hear, she felt connected. Like he was listening. Like somewhere behind those closed eyes, Daniel Gatsby was fighting to stay alive not just for himself, but for her. Crazy, right? A nurse falling for a patient she'd never really met. But here's what she didn't know, what none of them knew. Daniel's accident wasn't an accident at all. His business partner, Harrington Corleone, had discovered that Daniel was about to expose their company's illegal dealings. Bribes, corruption, lives destroyed for profit. Daniel had found it all. And Harrington, he couldn't let that information see the light of day. So he tampered with Daniel's car, expecting a clean death and a convenient cover-up. But Daniel survived. Barely. And now, as he lay unconscious in that hospital bed, Harrington was already planning his next move. Because a man in a coma can still wake up. A man in a coma can still talk. What Harrington didn't count on was Zara Williams. He didn't count on a night shift nurse who would fight for her patient like he was family, who would notice things others missed, who would become Daniel's guardian angel without even knowing it. Are you feeling that tension, my friend? Because we're just getting started, and trust me when I say, you haven't seen anything yet. 3 weeks passed, and something beautiful and heartbreaking began to unfold in room 314. You see, love, night shifts have their own rhythm, their own quiet magic. When the rest of the world sleeps, when the hospital settles into that peaceful hush, that's when the real connections happen. Zara would finish her rounds, check on her other patients, and then, she'd always find herself back in Daniel's room. At first, she told herself it was professional, monitoring his vitals, adjusting his position to prevent bed sores, the standard care any good nurse provides. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. "You know," she whispered to him one night, pulling a chair close to his bed. "Everyone thinks you're this untouchable billionaire, but I bet you're just lonely up there in your glass towers." Her voice was soft, tender, the kind of voice that could heal wounds just by existing. She began talking to him every night. About her day, her dreams, her fears. About growing up in a neighborhood where dreams felt impossible. About working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school. About her mother who cleaned offices at night so Zara could have a better life. "I wonder what you dream about," she murmured, gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Do you dream about board meetings and stock prices? Or do you dream about something more, something real?" If you were in that room, my friend, you would have felt the intimacy of those moments. The way her hand lingered on his, the way her eyes searched his face for any sign of response, the way love, real, impossible love, began growing in the space between heartbeats. What Zara didn't know was that Daniel was hearing every word. You see, he existed in a strange place between consciousness and sleep. His body was healing, but his mind was trapped, aware but unable to respond. He heard her stories about her childhood, her dreams of traveling to Paris, her fear that she'd never find someone who truly understood her heart. And night by night, word by whispered word, Daniel Gatsby was falling hopelessly, completely in love with his night nurse. He tried to move, tried to open his eyes, tried to squeeze her hand when she held his. But his body wouldn't obey. All he could do was listen, and feel, and fall deeper into something he'd never experienced before. Unconditional love from someone who expected nothing in return. But here's where it gets complicated, love. Because while Zara was opening her heart in that quiet room, Harrington Corleone was getting nervous. The doctors kept saying Daniel's brain activity was strong, that he might wake up any day. And if he woke up, Harrington couldn't let that happen. He began visiting the hospital, posing as a concerned friend. He chatted with nurses, learned their schedules, figured out their routines. And when he discovered that Daniel had a primary night nurse who seemed particularly attached, well, that gave him an idea. A terrible, calculated idea that would put Zara in danger she never saw coming. You still with me, my friend? Because we're about to enter the part of the story where everything changes, where love and danger collide in ways that will make your heart pound. Trust me when I say, you don't want to miss what happens next. It was a Thursday night in November when everything changed. Zara had been caring for Daniel for 6 weeks, and something was different about him that night. His color was better, his breathing seemed stronger, and there was something about the way he lay there that made her think. "Are you trying to wake up?" she whispered, leaning close to his face. "Because if you are, I want you to know something first." She looked around the room, making sure they were alone, then pulled her chair even closer to his bed. Her heart was pounding because she was about to say something she'd never said out loud, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "I know that sounds crazy. I know you're Daniel Gatsby and I'm just mere. But these past weeks, talking to you, caring for you, I feel like I know your soul, you know." If you could see her face in that moment, my friend, you'd understand why Daniel's heart was breaking with the need to respond. The vulnerability in her eyes, the courage it took to speak those words to someone who might never hear them, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever witnessed. "I wish things were different," she continued, tears starting to fall. "I wish we could have met in a coffee shop or a bookstore, somewhere normal. I wish I could know what your laugh sounds like, what you think about when you watch the sunset, whether you like your coffee black or with cream." She reached up and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw with infinite gentleness. "I wish you could wake up and tell me I'm not crazy for feeling this way." And then, in a moment of pure impulse, pure love, pure hope, she leaned down and kissed his forehead. Not a medical kiss, not a professional gesture, but a real kiss. Soft, lingering, full of all the love she'd been carrying in her heart. "I love you, Daniel Gatsby," she whispered against his skin. "And I'll keep loving you whether you wake up or not." That's when it happened, my friend. That's when Daniel's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 6 weeks. Zara gasped and stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, you're awake. Doctor, doctor." But Daniel's hand, weak but determined, caught her wrist. His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from weeks of silence, but clear enough for her to hear. Don't go. The next few minutes were chaos. Doctors rushing in, machines beeping, tests being run. But through it all, Daniel's eyes never left Zara's face. And she realized with a shock that made her knees weak, he had heard everything. Every whispered secret, every declaration of love, every vulnerable moment she thought was private. He had heard it all. Dr. Connor was amazed. This is incredible. Mr. Gatsby, can you tell me your name? Daniel, he whispered, still looking at Zara. Daniel Gatsby. And this is Zara. My angel. But here's what none of them knew, love. While they were celebrating this miracle, Harrington Corleone was in the parking garage, watching through security cameras he'd hacked weeks ago. He had seen Zara's kiss, heard her declaration of love, witnessed Daniel's awakening. And he realized that his window was closing fast. If Daniel was awake, he could talk. If he could talk, he could expose everything. Harrington needed to act now, and he needed to make sure there were no witnesses. That night, as Zara walked to her car after the most emotionally overwhelming shift of her life, she had no idea that someone was waiting in the shadows. Someone who had decided that a nurse who knew too much had become a liability. Are you holding your breath, my friend? Because what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about this love story. Stay with me. We're about to enter the darkness before the dawn. The next morning brought complications that neither Daniel nor Zara could have imagined. You see, when a billionaire wakes up from a coma, the world takes notice. Within hours, reporters were camped outside the hospital, stock prices were fluctuating, and Daniel's room was filled with lawyers, executives, and people claiming to be concerned friends. But the person Daniel wanted to see most was the one person who seemed to have disappeared. Where's Zara? He asked Dr. Connor, his voice still weak but growing stronger by the hour. Nurse Williams? She requested to be reassigned to another floor. She felt it was more appropriate, given the circumstances. Daniel's heart sank. Had he imagined the connection between them? Had her declaration of love been nothing more than compassion for a patient? What he didn't know was that Zara was hiding in the supply closet on the 3rd floor, crying her eyes out. Because the moment Daniel woke up, reality had crashed down on her like a tsunami. He was Daniel Gatsby, billionaire, celebrity, one of the most powerful men in America. And she was just Zara Williams, a night shift nurse from the wrong side of town. Their worlds didn't collide. They existed in completely different universes. But there was something else she didn't know, something that would have terrified her if she'd understood the danger. Harrington Corleone had been asking questions about her. Casual questions to other nurses. Where does she live? What's her schedule? Does she have family? Harrington had decided that Zara Williams knew too much. She'd been in that room every night, she'd heard Daniel mumbling in his sleep, and worse, she clearly had feelings for him. If Daniel remembered anything from his coma, if he suspected his accident wasn't accidental, Zara would be the first person he'd confide in. She had to be eliminated. Quietly. Cleanly. Meanwhile, Daniel was fighting his own battle. His memory was returning in pieces, and some of those pieces were deeply troubling. He remembered working late, finding discrepancies in the company books. He remembered confronting Harrington about missing funds, about bribes to city officials, about contracts that existed only to funnel money into offshore accounts. And he remembered Harrington's face when Daniel threatened to go to the FBI. 2 days after waking up, Daniel managed to convince Dr. Connor to let him walk around the hospital floor. Officially, it was physical therapy. Unofficially, he was looking for Zara. He found her in the pediatric wing, reading to a group of sick children. If you could have seen him in that doorway, my friend, watching her bring smiles to those little faces, you'd understand why he fell even deeper in love. This wasn't the woman the media would eventually paint her as, a gold digger, an opportunist looking for a payday. This was someone who chose to spend her lunch break bringing joy to children who needed it most. When story time ended and the children were led back to their rooms, Daniel stepped into the reading nook. Hello, Zara. She spun around, and the look on her face broke his heart. Fear, embarrassment, longing, and something else, resignation. Mr. Gatsby, you shouldn't be here. You should be resting, recovering. You have a whole empire to get back to. The empire can wait, he said, moving closer. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about. She started gathering the books, not meeting his eyes. What happened in your room? I was unprofessional. I took advantage of a patient who couldn't consent to. Zara, stop. His voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. I heard every word, he said softly. Every story you told me, every dream you shared, every moment you thought I couldn't hear. And I need you to know, you saved my life. Not just medically. You saved my soul. Tears were streaming down her face now. Daniel, you don't understand. We're from different worlds. You're going to go back to your life, your real life, and this will just be a story you tell at dinner parties. He stepped closer, close enough to touch her face the way she had touched his so many nights. What if I don't want to go back to that life? What if meeting you showed me that everything I thought I wanted was just an empty echo of what I actually need? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. A message that made her blood run cold. Stop talking to Daniel Gatsby or your mother pays the price. This is your only warning. Oh, a friend. The book she was holding fell to the floor with a crash that seemed to echo through both their hearts. Zara? What's wrong? She looked up at him, and Daniel saw something in her eyes that made his protective instincts roar to life. Pure, cold terror. I have to go. Please don't follow me. Please don't try to find me. And with that, she ran. But Daniel Gatsby hadn't built an empire by giving up easily. And he sure as hell wasn't going to let the woman he loved face whatever was scaring her alone. What he didn't realize, my friend, was that by pursuing her, by refusing to let her go, he was putting both their lives in even greater danger. Because Harrington Corleone was watching, waiting, and preparing to make his final move. Are you ready for what comes next? Because we're about to enter the part of the story where love becomes a matter of life and death. That night, Zara Williams sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone and shaking. The text message glowed on the screen like a threat made of light, and she knew with crystal clarity that whoever sent it meant business. But here's what she didn't know. Daniel Gatsby was 3 blocks away in the back of an unmarked car, talking to his head of security, a former FBI agent named Zara Ripley. I need you to find out who's threatening her, Daniel said, his voice hard with determination. And I need protection on her mother. Now. Daniel, are you sure about this? Getting involved with someone outside your usual circle, especially given everything that's been happening with the company. Sarah, I'm not asking for your romantic advice. I'm telling you to protect the woman I love. Can you do that or not? If you could have seen his face in that moment, my friend, you'd understand why Zara Ripley, a woman who'd stared down terrorists and drug cartels, simply nodded and made the call. Meanwhile, Harrington Corleone was putting his own plan into motion. He'd hired Victor Zas, a professional cleaner who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. The plan was simple: make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Zara Williams dies, Daniel grieves and moves on, and Harrington keeps his secrets buried. But Victor made one critical mistake. He underestimated exactly how much Daniel Gatsby cared about his night nurse. The attack came at 2 a.m., just as Zara was getting ready for her shift. She heard footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment, footsteps that stopped right outside her door. Her heart pounded as she peered through the peephole and saw a man in dark clothing picking her lock. This was it. This was how she was going to die. But then, and this is where the story gets incredible, love, her door exploded inward, but not from the intruder. From the other side, Daniel Gatsby, flanked by 2 security agents, had been waiting in the stairwell, expecting exactly this scenario. Get down! Zara Ripley shouted, her weapon drawn. What followed was a 3-minute firefight in a narrow apartment hallway that would have made an action movie director weep with joy. Shots fired, neighbors screaming, sirens wailing in the distance. When the smoke cleared, Victor's ass was down, Zara Ripley had a shoulder wound, and Daniel was holding Zara in his arms like he'd never let her go. How? Zara whispered against his chest. How did you know? Because I know who's behind this, Daniel said grimly. And we're going to end this tonight. That's when Zara Ripley made the call that would change everything. Harrington, it's done. Zara Williams is dead. Yes, I'm sure. Daniel is devastated. He's talking about taking time away from the company to grieve. But here's the beautiful, dangerous thing about love, my friend. It makes you brave in ways you never thought possible. While Sarah was feeding Harrington false information, Daniel and Zara were very much alive and planning their counterattack. You see, Daniel had been investigating Harrington for weeks, even from his hospital bed. He'd had his personal lawyer, a brilliant woman named Elle Woods, quietly gathering evidence of Harrington's embezzlement, his bribes, his connections to organized crime figures. But evidence only matters if you live long enough to present it. We have one chance, Daniel told Zara as they sat in a safe house across town. Harrington thinks you're dead, which gives us the element of surprise. Tomorrow night, there's a board meeting. All the major investors will be there, along with representatives from the FBI who've been investigating our company's connections to several ongoing federal cases. What are you planning? Daniel's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm planning to come back from the dead, love. Both of us. But even as they made their plans, neither of them realized that Harrington Corleone had one more card to play. A card that would test their love in ways they never could have imagined. Because the next morning, Zara's mother disappeared from her home. And the ransom demand was simple, Zara's life for her mother's. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the stakes had never been higher. Are you ready for the climax, my friend? Because what happens next will determine whether love conquers all, or whether some prices are just too high to pay. The call came at dawn, Harrington's voice smooth as poisoned honey through the phone. Hello, Mr. Gatsby. I understand congratulations are in order. Your lovely nurse is quite resilient. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. Where is she, Harrington? The mother. Safe, for now. But here's the thing about safety. It's so fragile, so temporary. One wrong move, one call to the authorities, and Mrs. Williams becomes another tragic statistic. Zara grabbed Daniel's arm, her eyes wide with terror. Her mother was the only family she had left, the woman who'd worked herself to the bone to give Zara a chance at a better life. What do you want? Daniel's voice was deadly calm. It's simple, really. Miss Williams comes to the warehouse at Pier 47, alone. She walks in, my problem disappears permanently, and her mother gets to live out her golden years. Refuse, and well, let's just say the fish in San Francisco Bay are always hungry. The line went dead, leaving Daniel and Zara staring at each other in the terrible silence that follows an ultimatum. I have to go, Zara said immediately. There's no choice. Like hell you do. Daniel, that's my mother. She's 70 years old, she has diabetes, she needs her medication. And I need you. Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. Do you understand what you mean to me? You brought me back to life, Zara. You made me believe in something bigger than money and power and all the empty victories I've been chasing my whole life. If you could have seen them in that moment, my friend, two people torn between love and family, between hope and desperation, you'd understand why what happened next was both inevitable and heartbreaking. Zara kissed him. Long, deep, with all the passion and love she'd been carrying in her heart. I love you, Daniel Gatsby, she whispered against his lips. And that's exactly why I have to save her. Because she's the reason I became someone worthy of your love. Before he could stop her, she was gone. Out the door, into a cab, heading toward what they both knew was a trap. But Daniel Gatsby hadn't survived in the cutthroat world of business by accepting defeat. As Zara's cab disappeared around the corner, he was already on the phone with Sarah Ripley, Elle Woods, and every contact he had in law enforcement. I don't care what it costs, he told them. I don't care what laws we have to bend or what favors I have to call in. We're going to get both of them back alive. At Pier 47, the trap was elaborate and deadly. Harrington had chosen the location carefully, an abandoned warehouse surrounded by water on three sides, with only one access road. Multiple escape routes for him, no escape routes for his victims. Zara walked through the warehouse doors at exactly 6 p.m., her heart pounding but her resolve unshakable. She found her mother tied to a chair in the center of the empty space, bruised but alive. Mama! Stay back, Harrington called from the shadows. This is touching, really, but we have business to conclude. He stepped into the light, and Zara saw that he wasn't alone. 3 armed men flanked him, professionals who looked like they'd killed before and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. You know, Ms. Williams, you've caused me quite a lot of trouble. If you'd just stayed in your lane, been content with your little nursing salary and your little nursing dreams, none of this would have been necessary. Let her go, Zara said firmly. I'm here. You have what you want. What I want, Harrington said, pulling out a gun, is to clean up this mess permanently. Your boyfriend has been a thorn in my side for too long, and you represent a loose thread I can't afford to leave hanging. He raised the weapon, and Zara closed her eyes, thinking of Daniel's face, of the love she'd found in the most unexpected place, of all the dreams they'd never get to share. That's when the lights went out. What followed was chaos in the darkness, shouts, gunfire, the sound of glass breaking. Emergency lights kicked in, casting eerie red shadows across the warehouse floor. And there, silhouetted in the doorway like an avenging angel, stood Daniel Gatsby with a team of federal agents. FBI. Nobody move. But Harrington wasn't going down without a fight. In the confusion, he grabbed Zara, pressing his gun to her temple. Stay back. I'll kill her. I swear I'll kill her. Let her go, Harrington. Daniel's voice was steady, but Zara could see the terror in his eyes. This is between you and me. You're right, Harrington snarled. It is between us. You always thought you were better than me, didn't you? The golden boy, the heir apparent. But I built that company too. I sacrificed too. And I wasn't going to let you destroy everything for some misguided sense of morality. The standoff stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Federal agents positioned around the warehouse, Harrington with a gun to Zara's head, Daniel fighting every instinct that screamed at him to rush forward. And then Zara did something that proved why Daniel had fallen so completely in love with her. She looked Harrington straight in the eye and said, "You know what the difference is between you and Daniel? He loves people more than he loves money. And that's why he'll always be a better man than you." Then she drove her elbow into Harrington's ribs and dropped to the floor as the federal agents moved in. The next 30 seconds were a blur of motion and sound, but when it was over, Harrington Corleone was in handcuffs, Zara's mother was safe, and Daniel was holding the woman he loved like she was the most precious thing in the world. Which, of course, she was. But even as they celebrated their survival, even as the bad guys were led away and the good guys won, there was still one more chapter to their story. Because love isn't just about surviving danger together. Real love is about building a life together. And that's where our story takes its most beautiful turn. Are you ready for the ending, my friend? Because what happens next will restore your faith in happily ever after. 6 months later, Daniel Gatsby stood in the pediatric wing of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, watching Zara read to a group of children who'd been through more than most adults ever would. But instead of being a visitor, she was now the head of the new Gatsby Foundation's medical outreach program. You see, love, nearly dying has a way of clarifying your priorities. Daniel had restructured his entire empire, selling off the morally questionable divisions and focusing his resources on healthcare, education, and community development. Harrington's crimes had been exposed, the stolen money recovered, and the Gatsby name was being rebuilt on a foundation of genuine service rather than pure profit. But the most beautiful change was personal. Miss Zara, a little girl named Lucy called out, "Will you read the princess story again?" "Of course, sweetheart," Zara said, settling back into her chair. "But this time, let's read about a princess who saved herself." Daniel smiled from the doorway. This was exactly why he'd fallen in love with her, not just her beauty, not just her compassion, but her strength. Her absolute refusal to see herself as a victim, even when she had every right to. After story time, they walked hand in hand through the hospital corridors where they'd first met. Past room 314, where Daniel had awakened to love. Past the nurse's station where Zara had first seen his face and felt her world shift. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked as they reached the elevator. Zara pretended to think about it. "Well, I do miss the night shift sometimes. There was something magical about those quiet hours." "I remember," Daniel said softly, thinking of all the nights she'd sat by his bedside, talking to someone she thought couldn't hear. "But I like this better, being able to talk back." They rode the elevator to the roof, where Daniel had arranged something special. As the doors opened, Zara gasped. The entire rooftop had been transformed into a garden. Not an expensive, over-the-top display, but something organic and beautiful. Wildflowers and herbs, benches made from reclaimed wood, string lights that twinkled like captured stars. "Daniel, what is this?" "It's for the patients," he said. "A place where they can come to feel human again, to remember that there's beauty in the world even when everything feels dark. But mostly." He got down on one knee, and Zara's hands flew to her mouth. "Mostly, it's the place where I want to ask Zara Williams, the woman who saved my life, who taught me what real love looks like, who makes me want to be the man she sees when she looks at me, if she'll marry me." The ring wasn't ostentatious. It was elegant, classic, the kind of ring that would look as beautiful in 50 years as it did in that moment. But more importantly, it was chosen with love, with knowledge of who Zara was and what she valued. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." If you could have seen the look on Daniel's face as he slipped that ring onto her finger, my friend, you'd understand why fairy tales exist. Because sometimes, just sometimes, love really does conquer all. But here's the thing about real love. It's not just about the grand gestures and the dramatic moments. It's about the quiet choices you make every day to build something beautiful together. Over the next year, as they planned their wedding and their life together, Daniel and Zara discovered that their differences, the things that should have kept them apart, were actually their greatest strengths. His resources and her heart, his connections and her wisdom, his ambition and her compassion. They were building something neither of them could have created alone. The wedding was perfect because it was completely them. Not a society event or a media spectacle, but a celebration of love surrounded by the people who mattered most. Zara's mother, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her daughter marry a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. The children from the pediatric ward, serving as flower girls and ring bearers, bringing laughter and joy to every moment. But the most beautiful moment came during their vows. As Zara looked into Daniel's eyes and promised to love him for the rest of her life, she said something that made everyone in attendance understand exactly why their love was so special. You were the patient who became my teacher. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be perfect for them. You taught me that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the darkest moments. And you taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the only way to find real strength. Daniel's vows were equally powerful. Zara, you loved me when I couldn't love you back. You cared for me when I couldn't care for myself. You saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. And now, every day for the rest of my life, I want to be worthy of the love you showed to a man in a coma who had nothing to offer you but his broken heart. As they kissed to seal their marriage, surrounded by applause and laughter and tears of joy, neither of them was thinking about the danger they'd survived or the obstacles they'd overcome. They were thinking about the future they were going to build together. The children they'd raise, the lives they'd touch, the legacy they'd leave behind. But most of all, they were thinking about how extraordinary it was that a single kiss, given in compassion to a man who couldn't respond, had grown into a love that would last forever. Are you ready for the final chapter, my friend? Because the ending of this story will remind you that the best love stories aren't really endings at all. They are beginnings. 5 years later, Daniel and Zara Gatsby sat on the porch of their home. Not a mansion, but a beautiful craftsman house in a neighborhood where kids rode bikes on the sidewalks and neighbors knew each other's names. Zara was reading to their 3-year-old daughter, Maya, while Daniel held their 6-month-old son, Harrington. Yes, they'd named him Harrington, because as Zara said, forgiveness is the most powerful form of love. You see, my friend, this is what real love looks like in the long term. Not the dramatic rescues or the passionate declarations, but quiet Sunday mornings and shared responsibilities and the choice to keep choosing each other every single day. Tell me the story again, Mommy, Maya said, snuggling closer to Zara. Tell me how you and Daddy met. Zara smiled, glancing at Daniel over their daughter's head. They'd told this story dozens of times, but it never got old. If anything, it became more beautiful with each telling, like a wine that improves with age. Well, sweetheart, Daddy was very sick, and Mommy was his nurse. And every night, I would sit by his bed and talk to him, even though I thought he couldn't hear me. But he could hear you. That's right, baby girl. He could hear every word. And one night, when I thought no one was looking and no one was listening, I kissed his forehead and told him I loved him. And then he woke up. Daniel laughed, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. And then I woke up, and I saw the most beautiful woman in the world, and I knew I was going to love her for the rest of my life. Maya clapped her hands in delight, the way children do when they hear their favorite story. But what she didn't understand yet, what she'd learn as she grew older, was that her parents' love story hadn't ended with their wedding or even with her birth. It continued to unfold every day, in small acts of kindness and large acts of courage, in whispered conversations after the children were asleep and in the way they looked at each other across crowded rooms. Daddy, Maya said suddenly, do you think everyone has a love story like yours and Mommy's? Daniel considered this seriously, the way he'd learned to consider all of his daughter's questions. I think everyone has the capacity for a love story like ours, sweetheart. But it takes courage. It takes being willing to love someone even when you're scared, even when it seems impossible. Like when Mommy loved you even though you were sleeping. Exactly like that. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Zara felt a familiar flutter in her chest. The same feeling she'd had that first night in room 314, when she'd looked at Daniel's face and felt something shift in her universe. Love, she'd learned, wasn't a destination. It was a journey that began anew every morning. The Gatsby Foundation had grown into one of the most respected charitable organizations in the country, funding medical research, building schools in underserved communities, and providing scholarships for nursing students like the one Zara had been all those years ago. They'd established the Williams Gatsby Medical Center in her mother's neighborhood, where healthcare was free and dignity was never rationed. But their greatest achievement wasn't professional, it was personal. They'd built a family based on the same principles that had brought them together: love without conditions, courage in the face of fear, and the radical belief that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. "You know what I realized today?" Zara said as they watched Maya chase fireflies in their front yard, baby Harrington sleeping peacefully in Daniel's arms. "What's that, love?" "That kiss I gave you that night. I thought it was goodbye. I thought it was me saying goodbye to a dream that could never come true. But it was actually hello. It was the beginning of everything." Daniel reached over and took her hand, the same way he'd done thousands of times since that night in the hospital. But the touch still sent electricity through her veins, still made her feel like the luckiest woman in the world. "Do you ever wonder," he asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't been working that night? If they'd assigned someone else to room 314? Zara shook her head. "No, because I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I believe we were supposed to find each other. Maybe not in a hospital, maybe not under those circumstances, but somehow, somewhere. Love like ours doesn't happen by accident, Daniel. It happens because two people choose to be brave enough to believe in it." As if to punctuate her words, Maya came running back to the porch, breathless with excitement. "Mommy, Daddy, look. I caught a firefly." She opened her cupped hands just enough to show them the tiny creature glowing in her palms before gently releasing it back into the night. "Make a wish, baby," Zara said softly. Maya closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched in concentration. When she opened them again, she was grinning. "I wish that when I grow up, I find someone who loves me like Daddy loves you." And there it was, my friend. The real happy ending. Not just two people who found love against all odds, but two people who were raising the next generation to believe that love, real, transformative, unconditional love, was not just possible but worth fighting for. As they tucked their children into bed that night, Daniel and Zara moved through their evening routine with the comfortable rhythm of a couple who'd learned to dance together through life's challenges and joys. Bath time, story time, prayers, and kisses goodnight. Later, as they stood in their own bedroom, getting ready for sleep, Daniel watched Zara brush her hair in the mirror and marveled at the path that had led them here. "Zara. Thank you." She turned to face him, eyebrows raised in question. "For loving me when I couldn't love you back. For seeing something in me that I'd lost. For being brave enough to kiss a man in a coma and tell him you loved him. For changing everything." Zara walked over to him, placing her hands on either side of his face the way she had so many times in that hospital room. "Daniel Gatsby," she said softly, "loving you was never a choice. It was as natural as breathing, as inevitable as sunrise. You didn't need to thank me for that. But what I will say is this: every single day, you make me glad that I was brave enough to speak my heart in that dark room." She kissed him then, and it was the same kiss she'd given him that night in the hospital, tender, full of love, full of hope. But now he could kiss her back, could wrap his arms around her, could whisper his love against her lips. As they settled into bed, Daniel pulled Zara close, her head resting on his chest the way it had every night for the past 5 years. "Sweet dreams, my love," he murmured into her hair. "Sweet dreams, my patient," she whispered back, using the endearment that had become their private joke. And as they drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their home, Maya talking to her stuffed animals in the next room, baby Harrington's soft breathing through the monitor, the gentle hum of a life built on love, both of them knew with absolute certainty that they'd found something rare and precious and worth protecting. Their love story had begun with a kiss in the darkness, given without hope of response. It had survived danger, overcome impossible odds, and grown into something that would outlast both of them. Because love like theirs doesn't die, it gets passed down, generation after generation, proving again and again that sometimes, fairy tales do come true. And sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin with the simple act of caring for someone when they can't care for themselves. Sometimes, all it takes is one brave soul willing to whisper "I love you" into the darkness and trust that somehow, somewhere, the universe is listening. The end. My dear friend, thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey. Daniel and Zara's story reminds us that love isn't always convenient, it isn't always easy, but when it's real, when it's the kind of love that transforms us from the inside out, it's worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in love again, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from you, and I love knowing that these stories of hope and love are reaching people all around the world who need them. Until next time, keep believing in fairy tales, because sometimes they are the most real things of all. Sweet dreams, my friend.